there weren't art history schools around in the way there are now. As I say, we've mentioned that there was a Courtauld, and I think Cambridge has a small department, but there wasn't much. And I think it's also very significant, as far as I'm concerned, that this is the beginning of the move from traditional art history into the new art history, which has now taken off subsequent to that. Do we need to explain the old art history and new art history to you?
I'm not a historian myself, so
I think from the point of view of this kind of accounting, to say those words is enough, actually, to say that it's the culture and the character of the discipline is on the move.
Now, I suppose for me it was very significant, and I do want to say this, because if you think of the year, it's 1968 when we finished here. Now, 1968 was a big turmoil year in England, and it was a time of sort of student revolts and student revolts in Paris and everything.
That's May 68.
I think, for instance, there was the Hornsey students revolted against inappropriate education, and some of it was to do with art history not being appropriate to their discipline. Now, I think the sort of things that I was taught here, particularly how to look, Peter Lasco taught me the sort of process to think, how was this made? He was very tight on that how was something made, and does it look as it does because of the way it was made? And that was seminal, I think, in my future development and work with practical art students, and getting to moving to think with objects, why does it look the way it does? It was really, really important how significant the school was and the teaching that we had in it, and the sort of attitude, really.
Yes, and a really good way to illustrate this, but coming from a different angle, is that Alistair Grieve, who was the youngest of the lecturers appointed, and really was 19th and 20th century, in his second year designed and had built a house that was based on the model of the Dutch De Stijl movement. You may know Mondrian's paintings or chairs. Red, yellow, blue and black bits and pieces, they're like three-dimensional paintings. He actually designed and had a house made, and while we were still undergraduates, we were invited to the housewarming party. It was an uncomfortable house. But, I mean, the fact that the lecturer was so involved with the kind of thinking processes of 20th century modernism that he actually had a house built shows you the sort of passion went full circle. Once the students were involved, they were caught and interested. But the same passion fired the students. Yeah. Because, I mean, Alistair was not necessarily a very talkative person, but he was incredibly passionate and set up a departmental collection of modern artworks. And when you walked into the department, there was this big white canvas stroke metal thing with lots of little buttons, flat buttons on it, and you moved them. You could just move them around. It was like a kind of toy, refrigerator toy. But, I mean, it was a valuable piece of artwork, but it was in the department and not particularly protected, along with other modern things that were scattered around. So there was a kind of working relationship between ideas, academia and your passion. It filtered all the way through the curriculum and into the experience.
Yes, that's part of one's life.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I think for that bounces off on me the fact that within our 10 students, you could divide them roughly into half. Half came from public schools, and the other half, which is our half, came from
odd places
and were much more left wing. And I think that's reflective of what was beginning to happen within art history, because there's a side within art history that was related to, say, Sotheby's and all that sort of prestige status side, which is what the public school people maybe know. It was a very acceptable thing to go to from public school.
A lot of people would argue that some members of the Courtauld Institute, for example, came from homes where the examples of what was hanging on the family walls would have been part of the subject matter that was being discussed.
But it wasn't easy for people like us to study art history before the course here, because I don't think it'd been easy for us to get into the courtauld. I don't know, I might be wrong, but
I would
anyway,
never have got anywhere near the courtauld. I
No.
didn't have the qualifications.
No, quite. But I think somehow for me this is significant as to what was happening within art history and what this course here was actually doing. It was bringing it into a wider remit. Or
I think
I'm
you're right.
difficulty explaining it, but I think it.
It was moving it from the strawberries and sherry, which was the courtauld model, which was very class-based. It was a finishing school.
Yes, it was.
For
I mean, you were saying
girls who came from very posh backgrounds. It was very acceptable for young guys to go into the world of art and antiques, which is very practical. But there wasn't really this space for looking at the 20th century from the point of view of the radical nature of modernist content and other related things.
Well, not even 20th century, Kathie.
Or even, beyond
Any
before.
other side.